Shalom. We're on chapter 17, Sefer Yoshua, the book of Joshua, the 17th chapter. We are continuing with, we saw the last few chapters of the division of the lands amongst the tribes. We saw last time in chapter 16 the division of the tribe of Judah. Now it goes on to Ephraim and Manasseh. These are the lots of the tribe of Manasseh, for he was firstborn of Yosef. And so on, it goes on to tell us about the families of Manasseh that were given the part of the land. Now, in actuality, Ephraim was given first, even though he is the younger one, and that is in connection with the same blessing which was given over by Jacob, that in spite of the fact that Manasseh was the older one, Ephraim will even be greater than him. The text tells us over here in the second sentence, these are also the lots for the rest of the children of Manasseh according to their families. And as we know, the division amongst Ephraim and Manasseh, Ephraim was given division of the land inside the western part of Eretz Israel, while Manasseh, the tribe, was uniquely divided in half amongst their division, their parsha. Half of it went, half of the tribe of Manasseh had their portion on the western side of the Jordan, and half of it had in the eastern side of the Jordan. Now, the text over here proclaiming to, and the rest of the children of Manasseh, is proclaiming to the eastern bank of the Jordan, where Manasseh's tribes settled in that area over there. This is unique because there was no other tribe that was divided into half, where half the portion was on the eastern side and half the portion on the western side. Now we also know that Reuben and Gad also had their portion on the eastern side, So those 2.5 tribes were on the eastern side, and the 9.5 tribes were on the western side of the Jordan. Now the text using the terminology over here, the rest of the children of Manasseh, tells us over here that the land portion on the eastern boundary was not really equal to, in spirituality, to the western side. Now, as we know, that portion never became holy until first the tribes conquered and settled in the land of Eretz Israel, which we know as Eretz Canaan. Only after those 14 years, the 2.5 tribes, the warriors, the army people, went back to their portion on the other side of the Jordan, and that area also became holy. But we also see that throughout the years, the level of spirituality, even though physically those 2.5 tribes had much material possessions, they had much cattle to graze, and that land was perfect for that. Militarily, they led the campaign in the conquest of the land of Canaan. Spiritually, though, they were on a lower level than the other tribes who are on the western side of Eretz Israel. In sentence number 3 over here, we find the text telling us the daughters of Salafchad. Now we're familiar with that he had no children. He had no sons, he had no sons, but he did have 5 daughters. And from the book of Numbers, Bamidbar, we are familiar with the famous story where we talked about the inheritance of the land of Eretz Israel and the division of the land of Eretz Israel amongst the tribes. Those 5 daughters stood before Moshe and Eliezer, the Kohen Gadol, and requested that they also be permitted to have a portion in the land of Eretz Israel, because Tzaflaftachad had no male children, so they would not inherit him, and they wanted to keep their portion alive instead of just falling to the rest of the tribe of Manasseh. They demanded that they would have also a portion. So similarly to that, here in the text where it's actually coming to the division of the land, they approach Yehoshua with the same request and tell him that our father had no sons but daughters. These are the names of the daughters. We're familiar with them: Machla, Noah, Hagla, Malka, and Tirza, the 5 daughters. They came before Eliezer the priest and before Yoshua ben Nun. The Lord commanded Moshe to give us an inheritance amongst our brothers, according to the commandments of the Lord. He gave us an inheritance amongst the brothers of our fathers. And as Moshe Rabbeinu told them over there, that when we lack males, the women do inherit the father, and they were also given portions over here in the land of Manasseh, equal portions to their brethren. So that's an important point over here. Now it's interesting to point out over here that we also saw in previous chapter, in chapter 16, we saw Achsa, who was married to Otniel ben Kenaz, the brother or the half-brother of Kalev, also coming before Yehoshua and telling him that she wasn't so happy with her inheritance that she received in that portion over there. And so it was added to her the upper water springs and the lower water springs. We find from these two chapters over here, the 16th chapter and the 17th chapter, the division of the land, that the women had a full partnership over here, or really were the main thrust in their love for the land of Eretz Yisrael. Just like when the division of Judah took place, Achsah came up and demanded that they be given a portion with water in it because of her great love to Eretz Yisrael. They would not be able to survive in such a portion which was given to them, and their plea was accepted. Also in our portion over here with the division of Ephraim and Manasseh, we find the daughters of Tzlaflachad coming up and demanding their rightful portion of the land of Eretz Yisrael. Now really this should come as no surprise to us because we're familiar that the women who left Egypt some 40 years earlier, the text tells us, Chazal teaches us, that it was the zchut of the Nashim Satkaniot, the righteous women, that really gave the merit for the Jewish people to leave. We also find that during the years that they spent in the desert, the women did not sin, neither with the sin of the golden calf, or with the sin of the spies. They had a great love for Eretz Yisrael, and so they also, the decree of dying off in the desert was not upon them. So we see that the same daughters of Tzlaflachad came into Eretz Yisrael, and in fact Chazal teaches us that almost entirely all of the women that left Egypt also entered into the land of Eretz Yisrael. They had a tremendous love for the land, and this is brought out over here in the text very clearly in both of these chapters over here that we saw in chapter 16 and now also in chapter 17, where they play a major role standing behind their men in order to show their love and to inherit the land of Eretz Yisrael. The text goes on to teach us over here in chapter 17. The children of Manasseh, after listing the cities where they would settle and sit, could not drive out the inhabitants of these cities, but the Canaanites were content to dwell in this land. Interesting pasuk over here. This teaches us, really for the first time we see this type of wording over here, that they could not drive out the Canaanites from their land over here. And it seems that, and it says over here that the Canaanites were content to dwell in the land. What does that mean, that they were content to dwell in the land? That's very interesting. And it comes to teach us that they sort of acquired some type of permanent citizenship into the land as being equals over here with the Jewish people. So we have this situation over here inside of the Shvatim of Ephraim and Manasseh, that the inhabitants of the land continue to settle there. Apparently the Jews didn't have enough might to throw them out, and so they became equal citizens with the Jews in settling these particular areas over here. The children of Israel became stronger and were able to drive out the Canaanites. Nevertheless, they put them to, as we saw in last week also with Sefer Yehuda, that they didn't throw out everybody, but in spite of the fact that militarily they could have thrown them all out, but they preferred to keep them to pay tribute and to be workers for all of their many tasks which laid ahead of them in the land of Eretz Yisrael. Now, we find an interesting story over here inside this chapter. The children of Joseph spoke to Yehoshua, saying, "Why have you given me one lot and one portion for my inheritance, seeing that I am a numerous people, for much as the Lord has blessed me thus?" Yehoshua said to them, "If you are a numerous people, then go up to the forest, cut down for yourselves the land where the Prazim live, the giants over there in Mount Ephraim, and cut down the forest over there and go settle that area over here." This is an interesting dialogue between the children of Manasseh and Ephraim to Yehoshua, the leader at the time. And why were they first of all so numerous? Because we find out in the count in the book of Numbers, where we count the Jewish people, the first time that the Jewish people are counted the tribe of Manasseh, the first count Rashi tells us over here in the book of Numbers, they number 32,200. And at the end of it, in Parsha Pinchas, we find that they have already developed into 52,700. So they've increased, almost doubled the amount of people that were in those tribes over there. And so they needed, obviously, a larger portion which was originally given to their forefathers when they left Egypt. Remember, the portions were divided amongst the people who left Egypt. So now they have almost doubled their population over here, the tribe of Manasseh, and obviously they needed more room. The advice that Yoshua tells them is not a magical advice. He doesn't go out and say, well, you know what, go north or go west, young man, and conquer those lands over there. No, but it's very practical advice that Yoshua says. If you have no land over here in your portion, you're not getting an extra portion, because those are the portions that were given to your forefathers, and that's what you have to deal with. So you have two tasks in front of you right now, not just sit around and wait for a miracle to occur, some type of miracle that you'll get extra portions. No, that's not going to happen. Go out, roll up your sleeves, physically cut down the forests over here, and you will be able to have a lot more land. The other advice that he tells them over here, Yeshua spoke to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, you are a numerous people, and you have great power. You shall not have one lot, but the mountains shall be yours, and the forest, and you shall cut it down, and its outgoing shall be yours, and you shall drive out the Canaanites, though he has iron chariots, and though he is strong. Yeshua tells them, yeah, sure, they have iron chariots, and you may have inferior weapons to them, but you've seen what we are able to do with faith. And our cause, that Eretz Yisrael, was given to us because God had commanded this to be so. And so, in spite of the fact that they have iron chariots, they have these tanks over here, and they may look powerful, you have two things to do. Roll up your sleeves and get busy. Cut down the forest so you'll have extra room over here. Conquer the mountaintops. Enter into the valleys. And remove the Canaanites from your land that they're occupying over here. Unfortunately, this plea of Yoshua and this advice of Yoshua left on ears that didn't hear the advice, and they didn't take it because that was it looked like the hard way to go. And so they left the packs of the Canaanites in the land of Eretz Yisrael, as did Yehuda and the rest of the tribes. And they eventually would rebel against the Jewish people and cause much hardship to us in the coming years. So here we see this chapter over here concludes chapter 17, that the Jewish people are settling down. We've talked about the tribe of Manasseh and Ephraim and their development on the eastern side and on the western side. Their land was too small for them because they were numerous. And so Yoshua gave them the practical advice: cut down the forest, get to work, roll up your sleeves. This is what Jews have to do. But Jews never really liked to work physically, so that was always a problem with us. And then, even though the Canaanites are powerful and they have this tremendous weaponry, we are also powerful. We have God on our side. And we have a just cause for settling and living in the land of Eretz Yisrael, because this is His will to move out the 7 nations that lived here, like today, and settle all portions of Eretz Yisrael. Levi Chazan, thanks for being with us.